Okay, welcome back. I'm going to cover some old ground. I mean, I think I've covered virtually everything I have to say, but I'm finding that certain of my people that have been listening to what I've been saying, working our way, have a miscomprehension about something pretty important. So I'm going to just go through these three key components of the visual impression in the that affect the methodology. And I say that the components of the methodology might even be the right way to say it. But they're just aspects of the visual world and how we treat them in this all the horses at once process. So before I start, thank you, Nancy D. and Adrid B. for those really nice and in Adria's case, recurring, but in Nancy's case, you keep coming back and giving us frequent donations. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you both extremely. Thank you very much. And all you guys out there, thank these people who keep on supporting us. And I say that meaning Mr. Producer in particular. So, all right, nobody's getting rich, as I've been saying to you. We're breaking even. All right. So this is what RM says. Yesterday, I was talking with a fellow participant in your intensive about setting up your top and bottom exits and effect constellation. That was my intro to painting with you and sort of my first impression. I was telling them how I pick a top and bottom in my subject and proceed to relate things to it, but there's a discrepancy if you're looking through the viewfinder to a fixed composition. If that top bottom is not perfectly placed in the rectangle arrangement, then wouldn't every other thing related to it cascade and be wrong? Usually then, my answer is to adjust the viewfinder to fit the chosen top-bottom relationship and negative space around it. Their position is that that shouldn't be the case, and I should mass in early to get a feel for proportions and keep the view spacing from the finder. It makes me think if something is truly fixed, like copying a painting, then the exact placement in the rectangle becomes quite important. In my experience, most of the time, after I get to fill in the canvas finally, say 3 sessions later, I find that everything is somewhat wrong or very wrong, and I have to move a lot of stuff around, and it's demoralizing. But I could not see it until that point in the progression. I've heard you say to avoid moving top and bottom, but in reference to such a fixed composition, how do you truly know unless you use a mechanical aid? RM. I don't know what the mechanical aid would be unless you mean a camera R. But I appreciate that question. And what I've done is I've summarized the question. And I'm summarizing this question. So I'm summarizing what RM wrote with the idea of narrowing down. And I spoke to him in person briefly, so I think I'm doing this well, but in any case, I'm going to do it this way, and then I'm going to just use his conversation as a takeoff point to talk about these three major components of the visual impression, all of which have to get incorporated early and involved throughout the entire process. So right now, this is all going to be confusing to you. Let me put this summary statement here, which I'm attributing to RM, but it's not his exact words. I've been to your intensives and applying your visual order concepts to my work. However, I'm finding that when I work strictly with the strong effects, I have a hard time getting a handle on the composition, trying to incorporate all the exits, etc. Okay? Now, you may not think that's a great summary of this thing, but probably the best I can do. So what I'm going to talk about are these three things, and I want them on the screen. Actually, I should, for the sake of, I shouldn't have put them like this, should I, Mr. Producer? But we may as well just look right past. First of all, when we lay a painting in, we're hitting color notes and we're looking for the color scheme. Now that's an all over the place at once thing, and it's a composition thing. There's a certain amount of placement, but mostly it's about the color scheme that makes it composition, right? And if you can spend the time in that first phase just enjoying sort of the Monet model of just putting color notes out there, hunting for the color scheme, which is crucial. It's that aspect of composing, if you want to put it that way. It's the color scheme. The color composition. Scheme is a good word. So there's three parts, but so in the grand assumption of all painters, there are three parts anyway. There's drawing, there's values, and there's color. Well, we're talking about a reversal of a certain process, right? We don't do drawing and then color it in like a coloring book. We actually go out, search out the color first, right? So you have these, so that's the first thing. The second part is we establish effects, that is where colors meet colors. Now these colors are color values, right? Because color by definition in our world is three parts. It's values, it's chroma, and it's hue, the red, yellow, and blueness. So those three parts are always there, which means values are always there. But then what happens where they meet is where we get this thing called effect. And so the problem is, when I talk about the visual order way of thinking, you're always dealing with this question of effect. Because if the values meet and don't produce what I'm just going to call light effects, what happens where dark meets light, you wouldn't be able to see light if you didn't have a dark next to it, so to speak, that sort of thing. If the picture was all light, you wouldn't be able to see it either. It'd be light, but you might not even know how to define the term. So what happens where the dark meets the light is what we call effects. And I use those as points, the way R is talking about here. I use them as points that make up, there's a constellation of these points that make up something I like to call the arabesque, right? So there's this thing that goes on in the painting, in the very beginning of our approach to it, there's this thing that's very important. Now, I'm not going to tell you to put it down first anymore because that's getting certain people in trouble. But what we're doing is we're putting down the points in the order of effect, or the group of the leading points. I'm calling that the arabesque for our purposes. That's what we're going to use the word arabesque to describe, the figure created by those leading points, those points of leading effect. It's just a thing, it's just a phenomenon, but it's an ambition we have. The third ambition is drawing, which is the two-dimensional surface stuff, right? And that's where how wide a thing is or how low it is in relation to something else, all on this 2D plane. It's all the picture plane, right? So there's that element of it. You can't get out of that. And the thing is, we're in it from the minute we pick up a viewfinder and peek through the viewfinder, you're in it. You have framed the scene, right? So when you say, when you start placing things in the scene, what R said is he's talking about top and bottom. Well, if it's a wide picture, you're talking about left and right. If it's a tall picture, and I'm going to show you these, you're talking about the height, say, of a figure or something like that. The high point to the foot, the head to the foot. Well, those things are established in the painting, fixed. They are fixed based on your composition, okay? So everything comes back to the composition, okay? So I'm going to just try to make it clear to you that at all times you have to do all those things. Now, if you're painting in visual order only, you may not have the strongest things may not be the two ends of the composition or the top and bottom. But you need those. In other words, you need spatial certainty. It's a form of keying, right? So when you're doing color values, you're talking about the darkest dark and the lightest light and the most chromatic note. You know what I mean? You're keying. You're trying to set this field up to live in this world. It's artificial world because we can't paint the sun with the yolk of an egg, right? So we're in this artificial world. We're trying to set up. We're keying on those things. What's the darkest light? And you use your paint to say, well, I can only make it this dark and have that color, have it live that. I can only make the light this light and have it actually be the color it should be. Okay, those sorts of things. So you're setting parameters. It's a version of what we call keying, right? When you're talking about effects, you're trying to find out what's your most powerful effect, given these darks and these lights. When you have that joint where those most powerful effects happen, you're trying to find out, what it's going to take to make it. That's what we say when a dark meets a light with its edge. If you cut the edge sharpness, you're going to be able to see the puncts, and you'll experiment. You won't be able to get the thing to be more punctuated, more projective. And you'll have to live. That's a keying thing. You have to live with that, knowing that that's the most projective it can be. And then our layin, of course, we are trying to establish the great arabesque, but there's always the spatial. So that's when you start talking about the exits. You start talking about, you may have located, let's say it's a tall picture, the top and bottom of the figure, but you also have to locate a left and right thing. And in particular, when I say a left and right, I mean a left thing or a right thing, meaning you have a mass and it'll be one edge of that mass, right? And you're going to say, I'm going to keep this here, and I'm going to set these here. Those are choices you made while you're looking through the viewfinder. how far the top and bottom are from the frame, or the widths are from the edge of the frame, are givens, and they don't change. They ain't going anywhere. But you have to have been looking through your viewfinder and seeing the composition, seeing the size of your center of interest, and how that high and how low and how left and how right, where it's all in equilibrium, and when it's all placed the way you like it to get the maximum out of the poetry, you see. Well, that's when now you can just glance and see what the left and right, how far they are. They're a half inch from one side and an inch and a half on the other side. You know what I mean? Those are now going to be fixed because they're based on your viewfinder's view of the composition, okay? So that should be clear, and that's what I've historically called spatial. But I see that spatial actually means this too. So effects is about this. When you're talking about low contrast versus high contrast, one will be near you, one will be back here, right? And those sorts of things. Sharper edges will tend to come to you. You have to learn those things. You have to draw, and you'll start noticing. If you blur your eyes a little bit, you'll start noticing which ones come to you, to your eye, projectively speaking. This is a Leonardo term, by the way back. So if you can manage to find your major effects, find out what it's going to take to make them, when you make your left and right joint landmarks, so you're saying, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to do my whole composition based on this being that far from this edge and this far from this edge. I'm going to do my whole composition based on that. You should articulate those joints with their proper contrast. Joint, right? It wouldn't be a joint if it didn't have contrast, right? It's going to be an edge. It's going to be a dark meets a light. That's what you can put down and find useful, right? Find one that's strong enough so you can see it when you're looking at other parts of the painting too. Don't do really weak ones if you can avoid it. But you're going to say, these two are these points of contrast. Now make them right to each other, the relative degree of contrast, the relative degree of projectivity. Make those right to each other and right to the power, okay? So that power effect, that is the lead one, that you said you must know what it's going to do because your picture depends on it to be successful. Now I'm hoping that it gets it all across to you. And now what I'm going to try to do is just go to, and I'll try to review this one more time at the end, but I'm going to go to the pictures and we'll just be talking about it, okay? So let me go to one of these pictures first, okay? These things rearrange themselves. So these are starts that I've showed you numerous times before. There's some value in showing you the same starts over and over again because there's so much information in them. So these pictures have some exit material, but mostly it's not about the exit. Mostly you're saying you're fixing something. This one's got an exit you have to put in the right place. But you've chosen the location of this stuff based on your viewfinder view, what you perceive to be equilibrium, when all the visual data is taken in. And I suggest that when you look at the viewfinder, you can darken your eye a little bit because only the major masses that have to be in equilibrium. But you're trying to get this feeling that this stuff is visually in equilibrium on the page. This is that left and right thing is equilibrium. You can choose anything you want for top and bottom. This one's been cropped. I don't know why. It should be a little higher, so it looks like I don't know how to place a head. It's got the frame. If you frame that kind of stuff, it's going to hit it. That's the kind of stuff you try to avoid. But so you do have an exit here, but mostly what you have here is you have to have picked a size. So this will be if you're painting a life-size head, you say, let this be such even if you're not painting a life-size head, you can choose the size of something like that, and that can be the fixed size. At that point, you can use the mentality of, if that's now considered 1 inch, then what and a half is this, right? So if that would be 1 to maybe 3.5, you can actually use a device like that just as your first calculus, right? But it depends on what the given is, and if the given is so, and that's what it certainly was in this case here, or in this one too. Both of these I've said it is by the head, but you'll notice that I made light effects effective. I made them do what they do. They produced light the way they did it. This sharp edge was important, right? The relative contrast and all that sort of stuff to produce this effect. And wherever I went down here, so I might have gone down here to this, but I would have probably based this on the head. Again, it's fairly common to the portrait that you base this distance on a size you've picked. But you still can say, if you there are ways to handle that. Let me just put it that way without getting complex. But you're looking at this, and you don't have to pick that face size. You can just say, let this be there, and then pick something else to be down here. Drapery is tough because drapery moves all over the joint. So you're going to be better off in this case fixing something like that. And then when you see the composition you want in that instant, make a note of something like this and let that also be involved in it, right? That this is an inch from the bottom or some such thing. Okay. Now, do you see that what I mean? That's the picture plane spatial. That's the 2D location on the page. How big, where. So there's a left edge here that's going to be fixed. Something like that probably is going to be the fixed. Something that's vertical is always the best thing for fixing a left or a right, but something strong too. So I've made this the top. I've made something the bottom, whatever it is, and I've made something fixed for the left side. It could have been this, by the way, because the hair is so mobile. But it's whatever it is, whatever you chose, and you've chosen these things well, then you have to articulate them well, right? But you're trying to get, yes, the arabesque, which is the effects, talking to effects, making a big abstraction, which is where this one comes in. That's a big deal. But the spatial on the page is based on the location of majors. So top and bottom wise, you'd say, I want this that far from the top of the head, and I want this V here. And you will try to situate that the same every time, right? So far from the bottom. And then I'm going to try to get this, and you're going to draw them so you can see them, okay? But this is what I'm saying is you can just do this by the leading effects if you don't have any significant exits. That's a different story from when you're doing things. Well, let me just do mine again. From when you're doing something like this. This has significant exits that have to be established. These things here, this one, this stuff. This is all very much about setting up the scene, right? I mean, the composition, all this stuff here and where it exits, this block here, all these different pieces, they're all part of this bigger composition. So this whole thing is a composition question right from the beginning. But it's pre-framed in your viewfinder. But you're going to base your composition on the placement of this power light. In this case, because the figure is that important, but it might be any light will be, what proportion is that to the whole frame? So you're going to look through the viewfinder and you're going to say, I wanted such and such a big, and I wanted so far left and right. And you can, if the left and right thing, you can just observe that some part of this whole thing may be actually centered. And that would help you if you can actually grasp that when you're looking through the viewfinder. But the up and down is your choice. You could say this is 1/4 of this distance here or something. You can just notice that. Put those things down. Or you can also notice the box that's created by that location. Just say the toe. But you can notice how high this is to that width, and you can notice how high this is to this width. You can make your placement that way. It's all that stuff. But those things, so this top and bottom are important. You have to fix those things. So you get them first in the frame. You look at them through the viewfinder. You make up your mind about where you're going to place them and all that sort of thing. And then quickly, so to speak, while you have that there, you notice how big, where this exit is, how wide that unit is, where this exit is, where this exit is. Any other major exits, notice where they are. That's all just part of the package, okay? So, and what you're going to be doing ultimately is getting all of them started. But this isn't a leading effect. You can use it. You can use exits anytime you want. They're not leading effects. But I would start by setting this up where you want it and getting this location and this in the place that you know is going to give it its location vertically and its location left and right. So you can get enough data in there to do that fairly quickly. It's all part of the general picture along with these guys. But if you're not using your viewfinder well, what I mean to say is if you look through the viewfinder once for one thing and then once for something else, you're going to be in serious trouble. You need to look through the viewfinder, place the figure exactly where you want it, how big you want it in relation to the frame. By the way, this is assuming that there's a given proportion to the canvas when you start this thing. But if you don't have that, you can look through the viewfinder and decide what size to make your canvas and then stretch your canvas to go to that proportion. But whatever happens from that point forward, you're looking through that viewfinder of that proportion. And you're going to pick up all these guys. And by the time you get to the end of the start, you want the major masses laid in, the colors again, or the lead and all that sort of stuff. You know, you're going to, your lightest light, your darkest darks, wherever they are. Your leading chromas, et cetera, are all setting the table. They're all what I'm calling the keying thing to this thing. So to review this, what you're doing is you're going through this thing and you're finding out your darkest dark, your lightest light, your most chromatic notes, doing a color scheme. Secondly, you're having looked through the viewfinder. You are saying to yourself, and some people want to do drawing marks. I wouldn't tell you can't do them if your memory doesn't serve. Train your memory better, but what you're going to do though is you're going to look through the viewfinder and you're going to establish the size and location of that mass of light. That's the key to this composition. And having gotten to the right place, you're going to take quick observations of all your exits. And then your job is to get all those things in. Okay. And okay, so all those things taken together. So don't just work from the visual order of the strong players. Don't just work from those, okay? And I think people have taken me to mean that. The thing is, what we've conceived in the visual order model is a process of proceeding that establishes major and strong things first. So if I say major and strong, major means the large things, but it doesn't necessarily mean strong. And I want you to conceive of that in your own mind. Think major and strong. You like these nice effects, Mr. Producer? I thought I'd beat that. Maybe I better put a book over there or something. Oh, golly. I don't know what to do. I think I'm stuck. Well, we like a little bit of mystery and magic in the painting, don't we? Getting it through here too. All right, you're going to enjoy this, Mr. Producer. Don't get too mad at me. But you follow though that there's two fundamental things, when it comes to what you'll call the drawing portion of this thing. There's the articulation of the shape and the effect at a location, right? So there's a shape thing about it. There's an edge thing, there's a contrast thing, there's a shape thing, even a color comparison thing. But there's a spatial thing that has to do with the entire picture taken together. So we're going to want to simply don't try to do this with just the big effects. It won't work out well. You need to have the big effects setting the table for the spatial effects, all of which you're going to need to set up the big 2D parameters, which is part of the layin, okay? I'm thinking I've somehow managed, and I think it might be just the way I phrased it. I think that's what R was suggesting to me. The way I phrase it, I say spatial, and everybody can take that to mean every kind of spatial, but I do mean when I say it, if you're looking at any of these videos, and I say spatial, I typically mean the two-dimensional, just that, two-dimensional space as the pure, simple picture plane geometry. You know, how wide is this when you're looking at this height here? That's what I'm talking about as spatial. Or what the point angle is. So when you have an effect like this, what is the angle to this point here? That's spatial. It's the angle, but it's all 2D. It just happens on the surface of the plane, of the picture plane. So you don't look in to get any kinds of angles or anything like that, of course. That goes without saying. Yeah, hopefully. So let's just look at the tarbells. So here you can see how articulately he's made the light effect right here. And you could say he's done the same thing here, but the major one, if the strongest ones, whatever the strongest ones are doing, if you don't know what they're doing, you won't know what these guys can do. You'll make this guy literal, and then you'll try to make this one to that one, or you'll try to make both of them literal, and one of them you can, and one of them you can't. So you have to go to the strong one, whichever you consider the strong guy. Your leading effect, I call it that, and that's why I talk about visual order. By the way, that visual order thing, when you're talking about it, it just keeps you from having to work on too many things. If you work on the big things and the strong things, you can get that job done in that first lay-in. You get the majors of those things really well accomplished, and they really do set the stage. A lot of stuff you'll see where he's filling stuff is just filling. He's really not worrying about lots of little drawing. Even in passages like this, it's not concern about the locals. His big concerns are where this lands, or where these exits land here, things like that, and where this is, right? So his placement of this figure on the page is a big deal. He's looking through the viewfinder, and he finds where something is, right, where this lands in relation to the two sides this way. How high and how low the total abstraction is, he's probably thinking about this, and that's going to be your biggest concern, because that's your major effect, is this total package right here. So you're going to be thinking about how high that is, how big that is to the frame, how far left and right. And when you see it through your viewfinder, then you'll say, oh, and what's the location of this one I see in my view? What's the location of that? Or anything else. You do this quick review. Do it while the viewfinder is in the right position. And learn them, memorize them, okay? You can return to the viewfinder any old time you want, but make sure you do the same thing again. Make sure you get the composition right. You're only working, that viewfinder is your composition, okay? So, but that's, again, the same thing you'll find him doing every time. He's out there looking at his major effects. There's a major effect down here. And the leading effects, as they play in through this area, the leading ones are all helping to set up your, the whole thing combined is setting up your center of greatest interest. But these points, as matters of effect, are the leads. This one here particularly would be the lead to all the other effects in the entire painting. Okay? So you need the exit, though. You need the spatial you need the location of this. You need the location of this, and you want to draw it accurately. What I mean to say, the only accuracy we have is relational accuracy. So you have to know this effect, what it's going to take. Does it have to have the softness of edge that it requires? It can't be as hard as this edge. And it has to have the contrast that's required. It's got to have the color relations right to produce, to maximize what the potential is there. So you get an effect like this, and everybody else begins to know who to be by effect. But you need these other guys to do their job as exits, okay? Or whatever else they're serving to do spatially. I'm hoping that's coming across to you. We had this discussion, but I'm doing this for you. This is one I did at the Arts. I've told you about it at the Guild once as a demonstration. And but you can see that the effects are the key thing. I've had to find out what it's going to take to produce this effective paper on a table. I forget what that was sitting there, or whether it's just an opening in the paper. It might just be that. But the leading effects, you can see what they are, and that I've made efforts to make them, and I've made all the other effects right to them as best I can. I've been tuning them to this area right here, everything I've done, every single thing I've done. But you can see how important, I've had taken great pains to get these exits in the right place, all of them, okay, even the stairs. There's a bunch of time you have to put in to get all these things to set up the parameters of this lay-in, of the painting itself. So the composition is going to be there, okay? But it's also going to be there because I put in color notes at the beginning. I am in the course of having the color scheme, of having the placement of everything to produce the wonderful abstraction, the one I've conceived of as the wonderful, the picture, And, and of course, the same thing with the location and size of your major effect, which is this group of lights taken together. So all these things, when you use your viewfinder, find out make sure it's very clear to you exactly where your left and right sides of this thing are and the top and bottom are to produce the location and size of this. So much of this is making sure you understand your dominant elements as a unity, which is what the light spots are here. If you understand that's true, you can darken your eyes down. You can see, now, where do I want those located? It's the biggest part of what I'm trying to do as an impressionist, is to locate spots. Not people and stuff like that, but spots, with how they locate, and whether or not there's an excellent distribution visually that gives me entertaining, whatever you want to say, gives you satisfaction. Entertainment is one of those words. But you can see that I'm making points in numbers of places. You could say these are the architecture, points like this stuff here. These are the architecture of this painting, but I want to make them with the effects truthfully expressed. So this thing actually, by the time I get the canvas covered, even when it's not covered completely, it's true to itself, okay? And truing to itself. So I certainly established this as these two, maybe as my most chromatic notes, chroma-wise. I've established something as my darkest dark, possibly this, and my lightest light, possibly this. It looks like it's this one, right? These are all the process of what I'm doing, establishing those things. But then when you put on any other notes, you have everything to compare them with. You have the lightest light, the darkest dark. You have the most chromatic notes. So every time you're hitting new notes, you have something to compare it with. Okay, but the placement, so then you get those right when you do these things and you start placing something, you're going to get the effect right of these two things, and you're placing them, okay? So you're placing them with their effect. So there's no preliminary drawing that has false content. okay? But we are absolutely, I'm really going to tell you this, we are absolutely using the viewfinder and establishing the size of the central abstraction, so to speak, and its location in the frame. The size is the scale, how big it is to the frame, where left, where right, that left-right thing, and how high versus how low. And you hold it every time you look through the viewfinder, you make sure you've seen that. But as I said, when that's true, and you can see those in the place, that's just giving you the magic of the abstraction of what you love to about. And these are just found compositions, admittedly, right? Although we do set stuff up, but you're looking through that every single time, and you take pains to find out where the certain numbers, at least, of these key exits are. Okay, you want to know how far this is from the edge of the board. It's two ways to do it. One is simple math. How big is this to that, or to the hole? And how wide is this while you're looking at this distance down here? Those are ones you can actually learn. And as soon as you put this mark down here, you can look at it and say, is that what I remember? And you do have to debrief to make sure you follow up on all this stuff. So I don't know if I can say any more about that. That's really the summary of what we do. Yeah. You can see the importance, though, of staying away from minor details. So articulate points, well said, that's what articulate means, are, if they're serving a big purpose, you don't call them little. Points actually want to be little. They want to be as fine as you can make them. So when you do something like this, you need to make that drawing right there really articulately so it's useful as a point to get to this point, which should look like itself. I don't need every little point on the hand. I just need those useful ones, but I need them to be very articulate. Okay, so now those are always going to be based on the power of the light effect. If this is the strongest light effect, it must be the strongest light effect from the beginning to end. And every time I do a new thing that has light on it forever, I'm referring back to that or tuning them to each other, as it were, right? So knowing that, let's go back, as I said I was going to do. I'm going to review these 3 points. So you do know that in the history of painting, we talk about the drawing, which is the shape-making world, the values, which is the dark to the light, and we have the colors. I'm actually changing that a little bit to say we have the color world, which includes the dark is dark and the light is light, and that whole world, and the chroma range, right? And the red, yellow, and blue. So there's 3 parts to that first part, to the color part itself, when we start with that, right? But then I've switched the other ones to effects. And I say that's the way I teach it, there's a follow-up in the effects. That's a follow-up to what? To the values. So you have a dark is dark and a light is light, and something where certain values meet, they produce your chief effect. So that whole body of effects is proof of the pudding. It's actually an extension or an additional test case to see if your values are going to work. You have to make effects. And you have to prioritize the power effects, like just as I said, keying to color, you key to chroma as much as anything else into these effects. You're trying to get the color side by side with the other color, the ones in contrast, and you do the edge, but you've got to produce the sense of the effect. And when you get 2 or 3 in there, they're going to have this projection. They're going to do a certain amount of projection. And you want to keep tuning them to which one is projecting to you the most, et cetera, right? So that's the second one. But drawing, I'm not taking drawing away, but I'm saying that we have those 2 setting up something. But this other something is only, as I say, setting it up. In other words, you can get these strong effects, but you might need weak effects. Well, you can still get weak effects. They just have to be right to the strong effects. You can still use them, though, for your exits, for example. But the drawing is the 2D data, right? So what the point is, what any point going to another point gives you on an angle, what width to height is, what width to width is, the size of an object to a different, or a value mass to a different value mass. That's all 2-dimensional stuff. You can't neglect it in a layin. It's all encompassing. Again, the key to it is the viewfinder. If you don't know how to use the viewfinder, if you don't know how to read all the data you need to read in that look through the viewfinder, as I said, one more time, set your center of interest, that key thing that's the dominant phenomena. And it can be a group of 3 things even, but you get that stuff set in just the right place in relation to your frame, in just the right place, right? Equilibrium, the higher or lower for expression. Get that exactly where you want it. and get it as big or as small as it needs to be, right? By making your viewfinder wider or smaller. And then you're going to have that at that point, you're going to have the opportunity to check your exits and et cetera, okay? So, yeah, so it's an all of the time thing. Everything is all taken together. And your goal in the start is to have all those things on the page in the way I'm showing you in this one. You have all those things on the page at the end of the day. So your drawing is all there. The order of the effects is there, and the color scheme is there. Okay? And that's the summary. So get back to me, somebody. If any of you guys are struggling with this stuff. But I notice that the way I say things sometimes, when I say order, visual order, and I talk about the breakthrough for me in this whole thing was I was trying to figure out what to work on first, second, and third. Well, I found how important it was to establish the power points first. And I think I let that possibly in some of my workshops be so overwhelming that you weren't seeing that and something of equal strength was also happening, and that is the spatial location of things on the page. So some people walk through and just prioritize location with drawing and things like that. I don't have a problem with that, except that I like to draw from I like to do everything at once. I like that model better as an Impressionist model. So there's always what the edges are contributing to the effect, as well as what the colors and values are doing to the effect, right? So that's just me, as I said, and that's one of the reasons I don't draw first, because I actually want to find out color schemes, I want to find out effects, and I want to then, but it's all taken for granted that we have a composition in mind that has its exits, that has its locations of the major masses as well, the major abstraction. And all of them, you have to somehow or other get that in the page and then make observations. Just allow yourself to see where things are landing and try to get them all on the page by the end of the day. And by the end of the day, you were saying 3 days into it, but by the end of a 3-hour sitting, you should be able to have that much simple stuff. I mean, there's a lot of more noise in some of these areas, but you should be able to have all your dominant things placed well. So you can tell that you have the composition, the essence of the composition, the placement of all those exits and major masses and all that sort of stuff. So, but that is the ambition, to see how much you can get onto that first day of those things taken in a major way. You will notice in a picture there's no subdivisions, no minor plots except for major reasons. So you might have a weak exit here, but it might not be insignificant because of how much, there's only 2 of them on there or whatever on this side. So, but you wouldn't be doing all these little exits. You're just doing the ones that are problematical or might be useful. Everything being done for use, right? What'll help deliver the package. So, yeah. All right, but remember, there's no minor subdivisions. You won't have time for them. Don't try to figure out what's in this painting, and I'll do all that little stuff inside this painting if the stuff out here is major. There are days when the stuff inside here is stronger than the outside. At that point, that would be a factor, early on. All right. Well, that's it. I've run through it twice now, and I think we've done it in a reasonable time. So thank you very much again to Adra and Nancy. You guys were so appreciated. And for all of you, keep on subscribing, liking, sharing. Get us to 19,000, and I'll let you know. And I've been saying, as I've been saying to Mr. Producer, we probably need to get together with you guys, and maybe just to you guys, you donors, and see if we can talk about a special just for you guys, where you guys can be there. Okay. Well, that's what I've got for today, and I'm going to get out of here. Wish you well. Hope you have a nice painting week.